All right. Well, like I was saying before, I'm just going to introduce each of you as we go. My name is Brian Zuska. I'm the director of corporate relations for the Sports Philanthropy Network. So I'll just introduce each of you really quickly with your name and where you're from, and then I'll let you guys introduce yourselves more from there. Give yourself, however many minutes you want to talk on that aspect, and then from there I'll let you guys run wild. And is there anybody that wants to start, I guess, on that aspect to really kick us off and lead us in the right direction?
I'm a rookie at this, guys, so you guys take the lead.
Okay.
Brian, are you moderating or are you just sort of
I'm,
introducing
I'm,
and disappearing,
I'm,
or what are you doing?
I'm introducing, and if you need me, I'll be here. I'll be behind the scenes. So if you need me, if there's a lull and there's, nothing going on, I can come in and ask some questions. If there's some questions that are on the side, I'll present those to you as well.
Gotcha. And then, so otherwise, what do we, I think Kent and I were both counting on some sort of a prompting.
Okay.
Kent and I can. You remember Boyle's law from like high school? It's like gas will fill whatever space it's given. I mean, you tell
Yep.
Kent and I to talk for 5 minutes, we'll do it. Say 5 hours, we'll do it. So it's not an issue, but somebody's got to keep us focused.
Then I will definitely keep you on pace and everything like that. So if you'd like, I'll present a question in the beginning, and then you guys can delve off from there, and from there I'll ask some more if needed.
We're going for a full hour, right, Brian?
Yep. Yep. We can go anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. So it's all recorded.
Hopefully we'll get some questions too. I mean, if you could, I mean, I'm sure every session's doing this, but to the extent you can sort of encourage folks to chime in and so that at least we're talking about stuff that's relevant to somebody.
Exactly. I'll make sure that we have a bunch of questions ready to go regardless. And then obviously this is all recorded, so it'll be played back. A lot of people obviously will be watching it different times because there's 7 other panels going on at this time as well. So.
And the topic is the foundation right, which I'm assuming just is strictly around private foundations, not with charities, or
correct? No, is this foundation right for you?
Yeah, I think Kent, that they're like most people,
right?
They're using foundation in the term of art sense, not like private foundation, but just they're using foundation like nonprofit.
All right.
As I'm not an attorney, I can speak more to is a foundation right for you.
We are about to go live. We're just about to jump in right now. Well, welcome everybody. This is a foundation right for you. My name is Brian Zuzga. I am the director of corporate relations for Sports Philanthropy Network, and we are here with a couple of experts in this field, and I want to get right into it. Introduce Andrew Morton, nonprofit attorney at Handler Thayer, Kent Seton, at founder and chairman of Edward Charles Foundation, and Kevin Kaplan, chief executive officer at Coaching Charities. And Andrew, I'll let you introduce yourself more. Tell everybody a little bit more about you.
Sure. I think you just covered the main point. I'm a nonprofit attorney. I do have the sort of specific focus of I oversee about 75, 80 nonprofits, most of which are connected to, as I like to say, somebody who is or thinks they are famous. I have plenty in both categories. Athletes, actors, singers, that sort of thing. Anybody who's in a position to use their public profile to encourage contributions, to raise awareness, to lobby, state houses or Congress, that sort of thing. So, I kind of have clients who are in fiscal sponsorships. I have clients who are 501c3 public charities, some private foundations, some donor advised fund clients. So kind of run the gamut in terms of the different ways to operate. And, it's just hoping to provide any insight I can on kind of which one is right under which circumstances and what the advantages and disadvantages are, that sort of thing. I'm going to shut up now. Tough for me to do. Go for it, Kent.
Thanks, Andrew. Kent?
Thanks, Andrew. Kent Seton. I'm a founder of a umbrella of charities called the Edward Charles Foundation. Andrew and I, Morton, that is, have worked together closely for many years. I'm also, for the most part, a recovering lawyer. We run about 100 charitable initiatives for our clients around the world, ranging from saving endangered species to advancing social justice and prison reform. Um, Being on sort of the backside of running charitable entities, from the practical standpoint, the choice of structure, whether you set up your own charitable entity or you come in an umbrella, is something that, Andrew and I talk a lot about with our clients in terms of what we would call sort of pre-formation considerations. There's some practical nuances to it as well as legal stuff, and we'll get into that sort of as we go along. But pleasure to be here. I feel very honored to be here with Mr. Morton after many years of being on panels together. This is another bright spot in my day, and a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we met on a panel, so this is like it's like a reunion.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, good. And the third person on our panel is Kevin Kaplan. Kevin.
Hey, thank you. Well, I'm the outsider. I've just met Kent and Andrew for the first time, so good to be here with everyone. As Brian mentioned, I'm chairman and CEO of Coaching Charities. We're a foundation management company. We have some of the top names in the National Football League. Work with the United States Navy SEALs, SEAL Legacy Foundation, Black College Football Hall of Fame, the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame, just a wide range of different foundations, and love what we do. Get to help people. We deal with just about every kind of cause you can imagine, and so it's really awesome to be here, and hopefully I can offer a couple of kernels of wisdom.
Good. Welcome. I'm glad to have everybody here today. I guess I'll get us started with a question and go on a basic aspect and let you guys delve from there. As a foundation, direct giving or set up a foundation, I guess. Can you talk a little bit about the advantages, disadvantages of both of those? If, for say it's an organization who's, coming just into their own, or if it's an athlete, how would you, I guess, talk about that? Andrew, I'll let you start.
Sure. It's I would actually change the question a little bit, because it's not necessarily set up a foundation or just do direct giving. In fact, of the 75, 80 clients I mentioned that my team was responsible for oversight compliance, about 50, 55 of them right now operate through something other than their own 501c3. So I am a huge advocate for alternative structures. I'm also a huge advocate for setting up some sort of a structure. And the reason that I say that is, there's kind of a funny thing about, our society that people will kind of like the idea of anonymous giving, like somehow anonymous giving is like more from the heart because you're not looking for recognition or you're not looking for acknowledgement, that it's like a pure gift. I think that's garbage, especially with the people that we work with, because in my view, if somebody with who's in a position like an athlete or an entertainer, somebody with a fan base, chooses to do something anonymously, they're missing an opportunity to be a leader in the space. They're missing an opportunity to sort of to inspire, other players, other singers, other actors, their peer group to do the same thing. So I get where it comes from that people, some people would rather be kind of on the down low with it, but I think that's missing a huge opportunity. And the reason I said that, like I changed the question a bit, is that again, if there's one thing that folks should come away with, it's that this kind of knee jerk reaction of I want to be philanthropic, therefore I should start my own 501c3. Is categorically false. As Kent mentioned, we've worked together for many, many years. I've sent clients his way. He's sent clients to me. And again, better than 2/3 of my roster has a brand, like a philanthropy brand under their name, but it's not an independent 501c3 requiring that sort of oversight and compliance. So, I guess the answer in my view is not just giving, because that misses an opportunity to be a leader by carving out that sort of personal philanthropy brand, but not necessarily start your own foundation. It's likely something in between, which is create that brand under an alternative structure like Kent offers through Edward Charles Foundation, and sort of promote that brand as a way to be out in front, among the peers, and have a brand, but at the same time not be burdened with all the regulatory responsibility and compliance and governance responsibility of having your own organization.
All right,
So
so if I can summarize that one, it's you have the opportunity. You can either be a 501c3, or you can maybe partner with somebody that already is, and just brand that a better as yourself and be with them. Okay.
So I agree with a lot with Andrew just said. So what we tell potential clients is this: we actually try to talk them out of starting a foundation. We try to scare them off. We tell them that, hey, this is not something you're just doing to keep up with the Joneses as part of your quote brand. You have to have passion for the cause, and you got to be involved. As I mentioned, we work with a lot of athletes, and we're fortunate the ones that we work with have both feet in. They're active in the program. They show up. They're involved with the decision making, and that's really a prerequisite to have this. Now, what a lot of people don't know is a significant majority of foundations raise under $100,000 a year, and so really you don't have a situation where you start a foundation, you turn the lights on, and all of a sudden money starts flowing in. It takes work. You have to have a development plan. You have to have a strategy, and you have to have passion. And it also helps if you have a narrative, a narrative where maybe you're in your own life's journey. You dealt with adversity that you can use to help others, sharing your experiences, those kind of things. But it's a serious step, and if you're not going to be all in, then I would definitely recommend a donor advised fund or under another umbrella. But if you are all in and there's a potential for development there with fundraising, I would strongly recommend you move forward with your own C3, with your own board of directors, and be active. And I think that's going to be the key to a successful nonprofit enterprise.
That's good. Okay.
I'll jump in. I think that I'm assuming a lot of the folks on this call are involved in some way with an athlete or somebody that's in the world of sport. Celebrity athletes have a tremendous ability to drive fundraising initiatives for charity. So giving outright money doesn't make sense in that question. To Andrew's sort of comment earlier, you really have to look at what I call the inputs and the outputs, what's coming into the structure and what's going out. If you're going to do fundraising, the athlete's going to do fundraising. You're on a team advising the athlete should they set up their own. One reason why Andrew's used a lot of fiscal sponsors over the years as a lawyer is because it's quick. It's easy to get set up underneath an umbrella. It doesn't take 6 months. You also get what I call a first look. In the entertainment business, that's a first look at a deal, looking at a script. This is a first look at seeing, hey, am I going to have any stamina with this charity? I throw my first event. Let's see how it goes. Let's get a better understanding. Let me get my feet wet. And using an umbrella really allows you that experience of really seeing how much legs it really has, because to Kevin's point, it's actually very hard to start a charity. The success rate of charities is incredibly low in terms of creating sustainable growing models. So coming underneath an umbrella gives you this opportunity to explore it, to get your feet wet, taste it, feel it, and then see if you want to go out on your own. You can always do that. And Andrew loves sending termination letters to fiscal sponsors. He always sends some very threatening letters to me when he decides to move his clients on. And so it's not very hard, actually, and you can protect the IP and I'll do all these wonderful things. So it's really an easy way to get your feet wet. If it doesn't work, you send the termination letter that we're ending because we don't have any fun. We're the little funds that we have, we're going to give to the Boys Club and Girls Club, but we're terminating the initiative and we're done with it. So to Kevin's point, once you've established a working model, let's say, anywhere from a year to 3 years, and you feel strong about your ability to raise funds and do good things with it, whether it's granting it to other organizations or having your own programs, then you can make a decision whether you want to set up your own charity. A lot of external reporting obligations. Andrew can kind of cover a little bit of that stuff as well. And and some internal reporting obligations, but you now have the responsibility of a charity, which can be fun, but it can also be something that you don't want to do as a team. You'd rather just keep it running underneath an umbrella.
One point that Kent made that's just worth making sure was loud and clear is that because it's often misunderstood, is that taking the first step through one of these alternative structures like a fiscal sponsorship or a donor advised fund, particularly fiscal sponsorship, it's not like there's a choice, a fork in the road, and you go fiscal sponsorship or 501c3. They're on the same path. You can start in a fiscal sponsorship, and as Kent was saying, like figure out how successful you're able to be, and whether it's weeks or months or years, at any point you can always flip that switch, make the decision like, hey, time to kick off the training wheels. We're all grown up now, and we're going to be our own C3. We prepare and submit an application, and as most of us know, it takes IRS these days 3 to 6 months to open the mail, so it's going to be a while. While that's pending, you continue to operate through the fiscal sponsorship. And when you do go to the mailbox and open up a letter from IRS saying that you've been recognized as C3, then at that point you can terminate the fiscal sponsorship, open up an independent bank account for the now 501c3 recognized organization. The fiscal sponsor transfers whatever funds are remaining in the account that they've been safeguarding and overseeing. They transfer it over, and you're off and running on your own. So, again, as Kent was saying, there's, starting that way is you can get up and running faster, and you can get up and running cheaper, and then just see how it goes. Maybe, I have clients who've been in fiscal sponsorship for, we will simultaneously, start the fiscal sponsorship and submit a C3 application if it's very clear that it's an organization that's going to blow up and raise millions of dollars. I have others that are in a fiscal sponsorship for a number of months. I have others that are in for years before going C3, and I have some that will be there forever because they just don't ever want to have that responsibility. So it's just important to understand that when we're talking about these alternatives, they're not an alternative in the if you do this, you can't do that sense. They're alternatives in the like, here's how we can get started and then see where it goes from there. Again, of the 55 clients I have right now operating through a fiscal sponsor, off the top of my head, there's 6 or 8 with pending C3 apps. So it's just sort of this constant revolving door of, that you come in, you see how it goes. If you're successful enough that it makes sense, then you roll right out. But there's no obligation to do that. And like Ken said, there's much more down. If it isn't terribly successful, there's been a whole lot more upfront cost to figure that out than the time and expense and process of waiting through an IRS C3 application.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Now, is there you talk about a fiscal sponsorship? You guys speak a little bit more about that, maybe just on the basic side for people that are watching that maybe don't understand what you're talking about between a fiscal sponsorship or a setting up your own foundation.
There's one guy on this call who actually founded one and operates one, so I think I'll kick that one over to Kent.
Right. You just repeat that.
Fiscal sponsorship. Explain fiscal sponsorship in 2 minutes or less.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. I guess the key thing is, if you're going to have an attorney represent you, they'll review the fiscal sponsor agreement, which is really the relationship between the umbrella and sort of the contracting party, which is called the sponsee. A couple of important things. One, there's 2 types, generally speaking. There's actually many types, but 2 main types in the world of fiscal sponsors. One is called Model A, and the other is called Model C. Model A is what is affectionately referred as the full financial or comprehensive accounting model. And Model C is pre-approved grant model, where really the fiscal sponsor is being much more of sort of a pass-through experience. And the grantee has obligations to create a budget in advance, and then, of course, doing a lot of accounting and provide that accounting at sort of the end of the expense of the grant. And so it's typically related to a specific grant for a specific project, whereas Model A is more sort of an ongoing charitable initiative. But somebody like Andrew could probably guide his client in the best model to use. But the truth of the matter is, for the most part, it's either one or the other. It's usually not so much gray as people like to think. So that's one thing to be aware of. But really, in your fiscal sponsor agreement, you just want to be aware of what you're agreeing to. What are the fees that you're paying? What are the services that you're getting? Your rights to terminate, things like that. That a good lawyer would review that, who's an experienced individual in the industry, and be able to guide you through that and make sure that you do the right things. And remember, this is why Andrew mentioned this too. Fiscal sponsees have to watch out for themselves. So they may actually even set up an LLC. They might set up a nonprofit corporation. If you do business individually, you might have personal liability. So you might want to be a little bit careful of that. And Andrew probably could expand on that. But ultimately, the reality is that, as you grow under fiscal sponsorship, you want a lawyer that's looking over all your contracts as you negotiate with people. Your fiscal sponsor is not your lawyer. And I say that because I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. Okay. And Andrew knows why I say that. So.
Yeah, and
Thanks,
it's
Ken.
really, not to overcomplicate it. The best way to think of fiscal sponsorship it's sort of outsourcing the financial management. What you're essentially doing is, it's sort of the closest thing that the nonprofit can get to like a parent subsidiary type of relationship, where the client engages in this relationship with the fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor opens up the bank account that is dedicated to that client, but registered to the fiscal sponsor's tax ID number, because that's what has the 501c3 tax exempt recognition. So essentially, the fiscal sponsor just acts as your accountant, bookkeeper, auditor, like anything with a dollar sign they're responsible for. If you receive a check, you mail it to them, they deposit it. If you have a website and you want to donate now button, you link it to the account that they set up in the name of the organization. If you have expenses to pay, you upload the invoice or forward the invoice and they pay them. If you have to advance expenses, you send the receipts and they send you a reimbursement. So they really are just essentially like a 501c3 back office to handle the money, and allow the athlete or the organization to focus on the fun stuff. They can focus on the programs and the awareness raising and the activities and the events, knowing that all of the financial compliance is being handled by somebody who's an expert. And one thing that's kind of funny that I am it sort of will emphasize with clients is, look, we all know that in the so-called celebrity philanthropy space, there have been a long list of not great stories about about the oversight and the diligence and the compliance, and guys paying their mother-in-law $250,000 and buying trucks out of their foundation that they use personally, and all sorts of nonsense, whether deliberate or just sort of blissful ignorance. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there are plenty of stories about non-compliance, which makes sense. It's like, why should a guy who throws a football for a living know how to run a nonprofit? He shouldn't. So one of the best things about a fiscal sponsorship is, I tell those clients, if a potential grantor or major donor says to you, like, I appreciate what you're doing, but with all due respect, how the hell am I supposed to believe you know how to run a nonprofit? I tell clients, just look them dead in the eye and say, I friggin' don't. Like, I have no clue how to run a nonprofit. That's why I have no access to my bank account. Like, I have outsourced all of my financial management to an expert that's all they do. So candidly, even if I wanted to misbehave, I couldn't. They won't let me. And it's just a very compelling story. And I say that mostly because the first impression of fiscal sponsorship, a lot of people go, well, isn't that sort of dodgy because it's like a donation to you, but it's not really to you. And the answer is absolutely the opposite. If you put yourself in the shoes of a corporate foundation or a high net worth individual, like if you had two athletes and one of them said, hey, I'm an NFL quarterback and I have a foundation and my girlfriend runs it and my brother and I are on the board with my, with my sister-in-law and whatever, but trust us, we know what we're doing. And another athlete says, hey, I have outsourced to a professional organization that handles all this stuff. I couldn't misbehave if I wanted to. Like, they take care of all of it and ensure that everything is fully compliant. Like, who would you rather give to?
Great. I think that answers it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would
I,
like to jump in. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin. I know you've been trying to talk, so I'll wait till you.
no,
Yeah,
no,
good luck,
that's
Kevin.
okay.
Good
That's
luck
okay.
with that.
Andrew makes a great point. I think it's a big point because I make it a lot in my conversations with people, which is that, athletes and entertainers, they really aren't geared up to take on the fiduciary duties that accompany running a charitable entity. And the reality is they're busy. They got a lot of other things going on, and this is sort of the last thing that they want to get caught up doing from the responsibility standpoint. Now, the fun part to it, or the gratifying part, or the fulfilling part, doing good, yeah, that's what they need to enjoy themselves with. But the fiduciary side, and that's what these umbrellas really create, is a fiduciary relationship over the funds, where it gives not only the internal stakeholders, which is the athletes and their teams, confidence that things are going to be done right, but also the external stakeholders, meaning funders, donors, and other individuals that are giving in corporations. So kind of assuring more of a professionalized environment of doing good, as opposed to like it could literally go off the rails if you don't get the right folks involved. And that happens all the time when we see those headlines. And I even feel like even for corporations, I've made a lot of strong, compelling arguments. Mr. Norton knows I'm very compelling when I like to be, to corporations that are setting up charitable arms, to do that underneath an umbrella too, because of the fact that corporations aren't in the business of doing charity either. And I just was on a call this morning, and everything that their legal counsel is doing, and they're much smarter than I am as lawyers, but they don't work in the charity world, and they're doing all the wrong things in the contracts they're drafting. They drafted a partnership agreement, Andrew, instead of a grant agreement, as an example. And I said, well, that could create UBIT and all these things, and they don't even know what that means. So you begin to realize there's a benefit of having professionals in the industry that spend a lot of time in this area. It's nuanced, and there's plenty of areas where you can go wrong. And for an athlete or a corporation that's well known, you don't want to chance that, really.
Now that we've scared you all to death about starting a foundation, there are really a lot of benefits to it if you can put the time and have the oversight that Andrew and Kent have shared. This needs to be done like a business plan. You have to evaluate your development base. Can you raise funds? Can you be successful in the space? Who are your competitors in the space? These are all the things that you have to look at. And these are all really important things. But I absolutely agree. If you're going to do this, you've got to be all in and be able to carve out enough time um, and make the commitment. And but I can tell you it can be successful. But I've also seen failures. And yes, I think as Andrew pointed out, there is a lot of horror stories of this, and I think it's really important when you're starting out a foundation to really understand. While there are no real clear federal laws for public C3s in terms of oversight, some, but look at things like the Better Business Bureau, Wise Giving Alliance, and some of the others in terms of charitable guidelines to create a successful foundation. So I would say this: don't do it unless you can do it. That you do your homework for it, and you're willing to be all in on it, and have passion and think through it. But it's very rewarding if you can actually make an impact and a difference. And that's whether ever talking to Andrew, Kevin, or Kent. Do it if you believe in it, and if you want to do it, follow your heart on it, but do your homework.
Very good. Appreciate that, Kevin. I guess since we're talking, let's say we did. We decided yes, we're gonna have a foundation. We're gonna get our 501c3. I guess what's the process? How long does it take? How much does it cost? Just a quick synopsis for people out there maybe thinking about that.
Well, I think probably from a legal standpoint, there are some clear things. There's the Form 1023 application fee, which can be, depending on the size of your anticipated foundation, I believe, Andrew, you can probably speak this better, but $450 to $850, I think, depending
Yeah,
on the
it's actually come down. It's now $250 to $600.
Yeah. And then there's state and corporation fees, because the first thing you'll need to do is incorporate at the state level, wherever you want to operate. So those are things right off the bat. Initially, I would recommend hiring an attorney to help you with that process, because there is a process. And you'll have other ancillary costs: a website, graphic design for a logo, stationery, and then you have to consider infrastructure. You're doing this from your living room, or you're hiring professionals. You're hiring professionals, you get office space. It can be very expensive. So you have to really think long and hard if you can make this work. At the end of the day, you just don't want to make a profit. You have to make a significant profit in order to be in compliance with the groups and things I've talked about, to make an impact with grants and those kind of things. Because at the end of the day, your tax return is public via GuideStar or some of the other organizations, and so the numbers have to match. And the tax return is public for a nonprofit, so it's got to be true and clean. Otherwise, there's some real consequences to that.
Yeah. By the way, one thing that Kevin just sort of brought up in a different context is worth following up on, just because like I, there is a lengthy list of sort of misconceptions in the nonprofit space and kind of terms of art that are used in ways that are very different than the legal meaning or the statutory meaning. And one of them is just the term nonprofit itself. Like, I actually don't like the term, and the reason is like Kevin was just saying, you have to make a profit, and some folks could go, well, wait a second, how can I make a profit if it's a nonprofit? Well, the answer is that the nonprofit space uses that term, and it uses the term profit in a way that doesn't apply anywhere else but the tax exempt organizations area. Like in every other area of the world, profit means basically revenues minus expenses. That's your profit. Um, when we talk about a nonprofit, it doesn't mean that you don't have an excess of revenues over expenses. If that were true, you're going to fail and not have any money to operate. The term nonprofit means profit in the personal profit sense. What you can't do in a nonprofit is, as an individual, have benefits that don't, because this whole space is designed obviously to help the community and not to put money in your back pocket. So I don't even like the term itself. I mean, I have actually run across a significant number of people who have said to me, who are running nonprofits, who say, well, it's true that like on December 31st, I have to spend my bank account to zero, correct? Because if I go into next year with $1, I've made a profit, and that's illegal. And I go, are you kidding me? Like, you seriously like run your bank account to zero every December 31st? Like, well, yeah, that's the law, isn't it? So it's just important to understand what the term nonprofit means. Is Kevin's spot on? Like, you better make a profit, or you're not going to succeed. You're not going to make any impact. So just recognize that unfortunately that's a term that's used in two different ways. Like, so when Kevin says nonprofits must make a profit, he's exactly right. And people who go, well, that doesn't make sense, they're exactly right too. You just have to understand that distinction within this goofy space.
Great. Well, appreciate all that information. I think that really cleared up some for some people. I guess my next step, obviously, once we've decided, is funding that foundation. I guess, has there been some good stories or input that you could give us, on funding the foundation?
All right, you guys didn't jump in, so I'm gonna spit out my. You hit play on one of my sound bites. I mean, the only thing that I would reiterate is, if you're in the celebrity philanthropy space and you're not taking advantage of the celebrity part, you're missing the whole point. I've run across organizations that are founded by high profile individuals, and the way they raise money is, by having event after event after event, and sort of dialing for dollars and trying to do like the same kind of thing that, a soup kitchen in Pascagoula, Mississippi does to raise money. And that's missing the whole point. The advantage that we have in the celebrity philanthropy space is the fact that the general public they're a bunch of jock sniffers. They're a bunch of, like, let's be honest, like, people like being around famous people. People like to have, we live in this social media, look at me kind of world. So what I always encourage clients to do is take advantage of that. Like, with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for Skyhook Foundation, we've auctioned off, like, play a game of horse against Kareem. We've had, like, go bowling with Chris Paul. We've had, meet Steph Curry, at Oracle Center after warmups for a quick picture. You find ways to prey on the fact that people love to interact with celebrities and they want to take that picture and post it on their social media channels, and they will pay through the friggin' nose. I mean, I've had two people in the last year and a half who each of them gave $25,000 to Steph and Aisha's foundation for a hello. I mean, it was 45 seconds. It was like, Bob, meet Steph, take a picture, here's the check, thank you, now get the hell out of here. And he was thrilled, and he was absolutely thrilled with that. It's just, you got to sort of brainstorm, how do I sort of create these, like, what I call, like, experiential fundraising, and to take it one step further is find things to do that the athlete or the founder is already doing. I don't like to set up fundraising experiences that involve putting my client on a plane and flying them across the country. I would much rather have them do what they're already doing. So, when Caitlyn Jenner is going to the ESPY Awards, we're going to auction off, be her date for the ESPY Awards. When a football player has 8 home games a year, you can have them, like, do give them a pregame field pass and a postgame meet and greet in the friends and family section, and then give them a signed helmet or jersey or ball or whatever. Like, people will pay insane amounts of charitable dollars for that because they want to be generous. They want to give to charity, and they're like, well, as long as I'm giving, I may as well, like, do something fun and get something for myself along with it. So just really brainstorm, like, what is my guy or my gal already doing, and how do we sort of create a fundraising strategy around that? If they write a book, do a meet and greet in the green room before before the book tour. If they play sports, give them tickets to the game and a post game, meet and greet. There's so many ways to do it. If you just think in terms of, what's my guy doing? What advantages do we have? We can get field passes. We can get backstage passes. Let's auction them off or raffle them off or sell the high, or put them up for sale. That's the easy way to do it. Like, why spend months and months playing an event to net 50 grand when you can have 2 people shake your guy's hand and make 50 grand in about a minute and a half?
Yeah, and also, kicking in, I think Andrew's, hit the nail on the head as well as Kevin. I mean, I think that, again, the celebrity has so much opportunity to do good. I think that the most practical wisdom that we can impart with you, Kevin, myself, and Andrew, is that you try to find the low-hanging fruit. I think that's what Andrew's trying to say around the celebrity. So as much as we don't want to say, hey, the celebrity wants to minimize their time, they really don't have all the time in the world. So they've got to maximize their efforts. And there might be from one to on the longer side of 3 different events they could do in a year, and usually it's really one real event they can dedicate, right? And then how do you sort of maximize around that? So minimize time, maximize the amount of money that you raise, make it fun for the athlete. Andrew and I have worked with Chris Paul for many years as an example. He puts on a wonderful event called the Celebrity Server Event, where he actually reverses the sort of traditional boring rubber chicken dinner, where he brings in all of his fellow teammates, and the teammates actually serve the meal. They're up in chef's hats and waiters outfits at a very fine establishment, serving the actual guests who are the donors, if you will, and the people attending the event, and the event raises many hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it's not just about the money. Chris enjoys it, and the teammates enjoy it. It's a fun event. So there's a lot of things that you can do to turn things on their head that make it fun. So the celebrity wants to do it year after year. It becomes a signature event. Everybody looks forward to it. The player does, their team does, the family of the player, the people that have come before. They want to come again. They want to bring their friends. That's how you build. Now, on the other side, what I call the outputs, it'd be interesting to hear Andrew and particularly Kevin's viewpoint, but for the most part, we try to minimize the athlete getting too programmatic. because of the liabilities in connection with it, in terms of their time constraints. So really looking to have them partner with other organizations that are great at what they do. Find the best organization that builds playgrounds for schools, as an example. Partner with them and build schools. Or find the best organization that has an educational curriculum that you can hire them and basically create the kind of curriculum that you want and the programs that you want for the kids that you want to dedicate to. So those are the things that if you can help these athletes do it that way, this actually becomes very doable. Instead of, Brian, you feeling like we're doomsday and we're scaring people, or Kevin, we're not. We just want you to be really, real realistic, because what we've seen, Andrew and I for sure, because I've been in this 25 years, is all I've seen is a lot of failure, unfortunately. And athletes not having fun and getting disillusioned, going, why am I doing all this? I'm spending more money than I raise, and all these other questions, and it's a lot of hassle, and it becomes the famous line, no good deed goes unpunished, because you try to do some good and then you get smacked for it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think in terms of celebrities, and I think Ken and Andrew both agree with this. When an athlete agrees to attend or participate in another athlete or celebrity's fundraising event, then there's a quid pro quo. They want the same favor back. And the next thing you know, you're on the road 4 or 5 weekends because you got to pay back all the guys that came to your event. So I think to Ken's point and Andrew's point, you want to make it as easy of a load as possible. 1, maybe 2 big events a year, and then look for other creative ways to do it. The other thing I tell you is with high-profile athletes, there's also low-hanging fruit in terms of marketing budgets. Not so much endorsement dollars, but just about every major corporation has a C3, and they have numerous causes they're tied to. Well, a lot of the marketing agents and agents ought to be, when they're negotiating endorsement deals, also talking to their foundation at the same time about making a gift to the athlete's foundation. That's overlooked a lot of times. And a lot of times the marketing person of the company thinks, well, that comes out of my budget, therefore I'm not going to spend that. But there are different pockets at different companies. And I really like the point that Kent made about partnering with somebody that's really good at something, parks or something else, or a children's hospital where you can do a joint venture and they do all the legwork, but you're there to help out and those kind of things. But the bottom line is this: in terms of fundraising, Andrew's 100% right. Experiential is key. People want to be around things that they can't buy. People with means can buy just about anything they want. But people with experiences, those are special and unique. And whether it's their kid or somebody shows up to a birthday party or something like that, those are things that last forever. And those are the kind of things you want to create. So yeah, I think we're all on the same page there. But again, I really would look at approaching this with a development strategy, figuring how you're going to do this beyond having a great year 1 or 2. How you're going to sustain? I think Kent brought that point up, which is
Let me
absolutely correct.
sorry. Let me just one thing to add. Another sort of benefit of experience-based fundraising is it's a bit of an arcane legal point, but it's an important one, and it's also on the top 10 list of misunderstood things in the nonprofit space. When you write a check to a nonprofit, that does not mean that whatever amount you write the check for is eligible for a tax deduction. The way the law works is that you are eligible for a deduction to the extent that your donation exceeds the fair market value of anything that you get in return. So when folks go to a charity event and there's a silent auction, if I buy a pair of 49ers tickets that are priced $200 each, and I pay $500, I don't have a $500 deduction because I got $400 worth of value. So I have a $100 deduction. And if, as is usually the case, if I end up winning the 2 tickets for like $250, I wasn't being charitable. I just got a great deal. So I have no deduction at all. But what's incredibly important about experience-based fundraising is that there is actually an IRS private letter ruling, as it's formally called, that to paraphrase basically says the fair market value of celebrity is 0, meaning that if I pick up a pair of tickets for $200 each, that's $400 off of my deductible, my eligibility for deduction. But if I play horse against Kareem or shake Steph's hand or go to dinner with, Caitlin or whatever, there is no value to that. Like if we put together a package that's like spend the day on the movie set with an actress and get to be in her trailer for the makeup and be on set to watch the filming and then get a 15-minute coffee break to actually talk one-on-one, that is fully deductible, less the price of the coffee. Like that's $4 non-deductible, which is disregarded for other reasons because it's considered de minimis. But the point is that when you're looking for stuff for auctions, don't don't be so eager to ask for tickets and hotel stays and golf course green fees, and go to people and say, hey, will you do this experience, will you do that, like will you do, like if it's a basketball player, have him ask his teammates, like will you play a game of horse against a guy, or will you like do a shoot around. A football player can go play touch football in the off season. There's all sorts of things you can do that that are fully deductible, because the IRS says, like, look, there's no way we can put a value on celebrity. I mean, if there are plenty of people who, to have dinner with Chris Paul, would pay 20 grand. If Chris wants to have dinner with Kent, he's got to pay him $500 an hour because Kent's his attorney. So so how could you possibly put a value on it? It's different for everybody. So the IRS finally just said, you know what, screw it. All bad. It just, celebrity has no fair market value. So take advantage of that, because the more you can sort of allow donors to get a deduction, the more they're going to appreciate, and the more they're going to be able to give more. I mean, I don't have to walk you through the math, but if something's deductible, it's basically 40-50% off. Net what it works out to. So focus on the fully deductible type of things, and that means focus on the celebrity interactions that don't actually have a fair market value. Those will be 100% deductible to the donor. Plus, they're going to enjoy it a hell of a lot more, and the client is probably going to enjoy it a lot more because they like the personal interaction.
Great, appreciate that. It gives a lot of good information for everybody. I guess the next step now is we set up our foundation. We went through the process. We've got the funding. Now we're going to be giving out grants. We're going to give out scholarships. You guys want to talk maybe to the legal issues, or maybe some self-dealing rules that people should look out for when they are going through this process?
Don't give to individuals. I mean, that's. I mean, Kent can talk about private enrollment and self-dealing and that sort of thing. The one piece of advice I give in this context is always, always, always find a way to give to a third party on behalf of somebody. Don't give cash to an individual. Don't write a check. If you're given scholarships, you don't have to write a check to the student. You write a check to the school and you tell them whose account to apply it to. If you're given if somebody's getting a grant for medical, for healthcare because they can't afford their medical treatment, pay the hospital, pay the doctor, pay a landlord. Worst case, like we have a number of clients who are sort of looking to give grants within the social justice, this whole everything that's happening lately, and they want to help people on an individual basis. We give them gift cards, like give them a Target gift card or a Safeway gift card or something that ensures that the money, ensures or at least does a reasonably effective job of ensuring that it goes where you want it to go. And one thing that I've learned lately that I had no idea until I started working with a client that's in the prepaid card world, that has gotten to a level of sophistication where you can give somebody, let's say, a $500 prepaid like Visa gift card, and code it so that it can't be used for tobacco, alcohol, like you can actually on a category basis or even on a product basis ensure that it's not used for things you don't want it to go towards. So if somebody goes to Safeway and buys $100 worth of groceries and swipes the card, it's going to go through. If they're trying to buy $100 worth of groceries, including a 6-pack of beer, it's going to get declined. So it's pretty remarkable how how you can kind of leverage technology to find a way around, avoiding giving money like cash to an individual, but essentially still giving them cash in a way that restricts how they're going to be able to spend it.
I think Andrew's right. I mean, I think that the common sense wisdom prevails, which is you don't ever give anybody money directly. It just never really makes an awful lot of sense. It also could present potentially 1099 issues for the recipient, which they probably want to avoid. And so, getting money directly is another sort of thing that sometimes sort of raises the red flag of the IRS when it comes to them individually. If you had a private foundation, which we haven't discussed sort of the nuances of it, worthy of a comment, because there's really two main types of 501c3 organizations: public charity and private foundation. We've probably been assuming on this call everybody's going to set up a public charity because we've been talking an awful lot about fundraising, and fundraising would not really be done through a private foundation; it'd be done through a public charity. And the goal would, of course, be to keep what we call your public charity status, which means at least 1/3 of your public support came from the general public. And there's some more nuanced rules around it. But the long or the short of it, if you did have a private foundation, which means your client, or if you're the athlete, you funded it yourself essentially, you have this obligation to give away at least 5% a year. Giving directly to individuals is typically a no-no, although you can do it with expenditure sort of responsibilities executed in place. But again, there's this sort of general, almost practical and legal sort of frowning upon giving directly to individuals. I had a client of mine, quick story, Andrew, you'll love it, wanted to give $10,000 away every week for 52 weeks in a row to somebody in need. And he pulled he did not consult with me, thought he was, the sharpest guy and the sharpest tool in the shed. And week one gave $10,000 to somebody who was in need, desperate need, and never saw the money again, never heard from the person. The phone was turned off. I mean, the whole thing, everything you would expect. This is a sharp hedge fund trader who literally probably would have never negotiated a deal like that himself. But then when he's doing charity, he takes off this sharp businessman hat and gets in this overly compassionate mindset, and ultimately really kind of screwed it up. And he was very hurt by it, disappointed, and didn't do any good, which really is not what this is about. That's why you hire professionals like Kevin, myself, and Andrew to help you not make these mistakes in a way that's reasonable and still accomplish good that you're trying to do.
Great. Yeah, let me just mention one other thing real quick, just because, just to expand on what Ken said, there are actually two ways that you can have a private foundation. One, like Ken said, is if if the individual is primarily going to fund it themselves. The second way is because because somebody didn't know what they were doing when they filled out the C3 application. And I say that because in the last month and a half, I've been hired by 4 different organizations who operate as public charities, but the person who did the C3 app checked the wrong box and they got classified as a private foundation. You do not want to be a private foundation. You want to be a public charity. Just take my word for it. In the 9 minutes we have left, I don't want to use it trying to convince you. Everybody given the choice would rather be a public charity than a private foundation. And I am very, very often seeing organizations that are just misclassified because they didn't have somebody who really understood the nonprofit space, who was advising them on how to fill out the C3 application and how to incorporate and sort of what the options are. And they wound up with an entity that's going to cause even more regulatory headache than it would have anyway, because they just sort of got headed down the wrong path right from the start.
Spot on, guys. We usually recommend to private foundation people, unless you're going to start this with about $5 million, probably don't do it. You have to have ample funds, and as Ken pointed out, there's a completely different set of rules with private foundations, tax issues and those kind of things. So yeah, that stay away from that unless you're independently wealthy or you have a lot of money lying around.
Yeah, and add to that. I mean, Kevin's right. I call it the magic rule of five, which is 5 million or more. I think it's worthy of mentioning, Brian. We should cover the 2020 CARES Act for a brief second here. Incredible opportunities in 2020, uh, probably mainly due to the issue of the pandemic and COVID, for donors to give at much greater levels and receive a tax deduction that is absolutely that's outstanding and astounding. Yes, Mr. Morton, I used both of those words in a sentence, and you challenged me before this even started that I could do that, and I knew I was going to be able to do that today. Um,
I didn't bet
yeah,
you on that.
what's that?
Should have made a bet. Don't we usually like have magic words to try to get into our presentation? Anyway, continue.
You can give up to 100% cash, okay, for charitable purposes and receive against your adjusted gross income all the way up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. So if you had an adjusted gross income of $1 million, you could give up to 1 million and receive all 1 million of it deductible against your adjusted gross income. So that's a very big thing. A couple caveats: does not work with donor advised funds, nor does it work with private foundations, but does work with fiscal sponsor funds, right? So if anybody's on this call and says, hey, I want to do something before the end of the year, not sure I can get my own 501c3 set up, that's where a fiscal sponsor fund can come in really handy. In addition, you can make that in addition to your any sort of non-cash contributions, which would be like appreciated stock being given in before the end of the year, which a lot of people in the more affluent categories have appreciated stock and want to take advantage of the built-in capital gain and get the deduction. Just had 2 calls literally back-to-back weeks of very high 8-figure sums of appreciated stock. So really an incredible opportunity for folks to make some gifting, talk to your professionals and tax individuals to see if it makes sense for you to do some of this stuff. Again, this will probably never happen again. And I think, Mr. Morton, I'd love to hear your comments if you think it will. But
Yeah, it's right. Good point about the timing. I mean, we're we're just a couple of months from the end of the year. You are not going to get a C3 up and running by December 31st. But, as Kent said, to put it in more legal terms, fiscal sponsors operate as public charities. Like a fiscal sponsor is itself a public charity. So anything operating under its umbrella functionally operates as a public charity, which means, going back to what we said at the outset, it's 4 to 6 months at best to get a C3 up and running. It's 4 to 6 days to get a fiscal sponsorship up and running. And if we had to, we can get it done in 4 to 6 hours, literally. As we get close to the end of the year, there are folks who will want to, take advantage of that giving opportunity that they might not have been thinking about until they realize, where we are with taxes. I think the record that will not be broken for me personally was setting up a fiscal sponsorship at 4:15 p.m. on December 31st. Well, 7:15 p.m. for me in Maryland, DC, the DC area. It was 4:15 p.m. in California. So 45 minutes from the end of the year, we set up a fiscal sponsorship because one of my clients called and said, I want to give $1 million for this fiscal year. How do I do it? Like, couldn't have mentioned that a couple of weeks ago, but it can be done that quickly. So if you have, a situation where your athlete or anybody who's a donor to your athlete's foundation contacts you very late in the year and says, I'd really like to give, how do I do it? Tell them you absolutely can, and then call one of us and we can spend more time explaining exactly how to get it done, but it can be done.
Nice. All right, we had a couple questions that came in. Andrew, do you prefer NGOs better? Was a question that came in.
So I keep mentioning how there are sort of terms that are thrown around that kind of, to be the follow-up question that I would kick back. So NGO is typically just an interchangeable term with nonprofit. I don't know, Ken, if you have a different opinion, but we usually talk in the global giving sense, like with the UN or with, international aid, we talk about NGOs, and within the country, we talk about nonprofits. But like an NGO is, I mean, that's what the nonprofit space is. You know, the nonprofit space is nothing more than the federal government or the state governments outsourcing their duties to organizations to help them out. You know, they feel the government can't feed everyone who's hungry and provide shelter for everyone who's homeless and educate everybody who needs an education. So that's how the nonprofit space, and that's how it was developed, was sort of this trade-off. Like, we'll give donors a tax deduction in exchange for incentivizing organizations to kind of do our job for us. So, you know, candidly, for in my view, NGO and nonprofit, exact same. There's no distinction in the meaning. I am absolutely, after this call, going to Google that and make sure that there's not some nuance I'm missing. But I've always used them interchangeably.
I think they're interchangeable. I think, you know, I've heard it mostly in this setting of like an international organization, where here we call it a nonprofit. Nobody calls a nonprofit here an NGO, but they do international for some reason, and nobody's ever explained to me why. But it definitely is the implication that it's 100% a nonprofit in that jurisdiction. So if it's an NGO in Rwanda, it's a nonprofit in Rwanda. Sort of the way you look at it, you know, from the language, the translation.
Very well, gentlemen. Yeah, I think that actually, time-wise, I think we're getting to the end. So once again, I just want to thank you all, Kevin, Andrew, and Kent, for joining us and getting us so much information. I know I learned a lot, and I know everybody else listening learned a lot. And I appreciate your guys' time and helping out with Sports Philanthropy Network.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
No problem, guys. Have a good day.